basically what we have here is a Brazilian GDPR law. In Europe, the privacy data law was approved in 2016 and then put in place in Europe in the last couple of years. What's happening is almost the same here in Brazil. The law is really similar to the European law that we have here. Basically, so it's getting in process and getting in place in the end of this year, and is trying to regulate and make a more clear environment about how data is recorded, basically processed and used from customers inside of the company. So it's trying to regulate how those companies are collecting and using the data of the users or the shoppers that they have inside of its companies. It's important always to remember that this is not a revolution of data. So basically what's happening is just an evolution of what we already have. So the actual laws that we have here in Brazil already protect data, already protect privacy. So all the companies, of course, that they need to know that the law is going to get in place in the end of next year, in December of 2020, but they should already be in compliance with it. So Brazilian laws already protect privacy, already protected the customer, and already protect even relationships between companies and people. Again, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution of the data. With GDPR, what makes important is that GDPR is about, in Europe, is about every person that is in Europe, or every data that is collected in Europe, or any company that makes business with Europe. So with this, Brazilian becomes a healthy environment for companies to do business, related to data or not related to data. So Brazil, it was a very good decision of Brazil. So basically, right now, almost half of the world will be inside of GDPR compliance, and Brazil is one of those parts. So our law was a very good decision to be as similar as possible to the GDPR, because it will make much easier for international companies to do business here and still be in compliance. Now, the only thing that is really important to know about the Brazilian law is that, of course, it's getting in place next year, and the same as it happened in Europe, there will be some time to companies to really get into it. So you need to be really aware of the partners that they are choosing here in Brazil, and how, if those partners are already in compliance or not. So as companies are getting compliance right now, the law is getting in place only in the end of next year, there will be some companies that will still be in the process of getting compliance. So for international companies, be sure of what are the partners that you're using, be sure of how they are exchanging those data with other companies, because it's important to know that you will be responsible for all the data that you have collected and you have used, no matter if you have contracted a third-party company or if they have contracted another third-party company. You still be responsible for that. Right now in US, you have specific state laws like in California, but different than what happened in Europe or what happened here in Brazil, that we understand that every person has the right to data privacy, no matter where they're from or who this person is. Specifically in the law of California, it only applies to Californians people. So like if I go to California, my data is not protected there. So this makes everything a little more different, but this is part of how the American laws are applied. So in Brazil, this is a much more clear environment of data privacy. So again, much more closest to the European law than it is in California right now. And the other states, some of them are already making some movements for data privacy, but it's not a common understanding of all the states there in the US. And a good part of the clouding data sources that we have right now are in place in US. It's important to understand where you're sending your data and if the place where you're sending your data is in compliance or it's not. So internationalization of data is an important part of the law too. When we're talking about Asia, they have completely different situations there. In one place you have countries like Japan, where you have some good data privacy laws already in place. In other countries like China, and we are talking here about half of the world market, market, you have a completely different situation. For those specific markets, each case will be a specific case. Well, what's happening with most of the Lima Consulting Group Brazil customers that are international customers is that they are always looking for to the data to be in places where GDPR is obliged. So, and this is happening with most of the companies. So even the technology companies, some of them are already getting prepared to have data stored in GDPR compliance areas for companies that are in GDPR. And the same will happen for Brazil. The biggest ones will be, of course, the banks, the telcos, and the e-commerces. Mostly because they are the companies that retain a lot of data and use it in its acquisition process. The only thing is that, of course, the banks already have a specific regulation for them. So with these, they are already 3 or 4 steps ahead of the rest of the market regarding to data privacy. The telcos are a few companies, so a few big companies. With that, the government is already talking to them. We have some cases already this year of the prosecutors of Brazil using the law that is not even in place, but to try to regulate how data is being stored inside of the telcos. So there are few. It will be a little more easier to control. But the e-commerce is where let's say the red ocean will really happen. So because basically what happens is that the e-commerces, there are a lot of them, different sizes, big and smalls, retaining a lot of data and using a lot of third-party companies to activate this data. So this is where the biggest problems will really happen, and they will be the mostly impacted of this. Of course, it's important to understand that Lima Consulting Brazil, we are talking about a specific part of that is the digital data, so data in digital in digital properties. But the law is about data privacy, all of data. So it doesn't matter if you are a website or if you're not. If you're a hospital, you need to have data privacy. We have an actual case here in Brazil that our president, actual president, was stabbed during the campaign. So he went to a hospital. All the data of his medical data is there. This is a huge data privacy problem that you can have there if someone just get theirs and take pictures of that. So all companies will need to be aware of how they store data, record data, and how they use this data, no matter if it is in the digital environment or not. It will cost them everything. First of all, because if you're not in compliance, you have a marketing big ban when it happens. So when the law comes in place, what will happen is that your data should already be in compliance. So next year, if you try to use the database of people that have purchased in the last Black Friday, if you didn't have compliance of them if this data is not in compliance, if you don't have consentment to use the data, or you don't have a law that is helping you to retain this data, you cannot use it. So the first thing is that it will cost them the revenue directly. You won't be able to use this data to sell when we are talking about one-on-one experience world. So we're always trying to get into experience of one-on-one. And for that, you need data. So this is the main thing. The other thing is that, of course, the law has some implications about some costs based on the revenue that you have. So it can go till 5% of the revenue of the companies here in Brazil. And this is an important thing because some companies, they believe that, oh no, this is not a huge problem. We won't have any problem. I prefer to pay the bills than there is a quotation that say, I prefer to say sorry than permission, to ask for sorry than permission. It will be a bad decision for sure, because the sorry will cost you a lot of your revenue. The first data was for the end of 2019 when the law was created. Then we have a change on it, passing it to August of 2020. Right now it's for December of 2020. But again, the companies need to be aware that this can change. So if we can, and that's how we are working with our customers, if you're starting right now, you're already late. So you should be prepared for the beginning of 2020, so you can have all the data of 2020 already in compliance. At e-commerce Brazil, basically what we'll be doing is to helping the customers that are there, the ones that basically subscribe with us, to have a first understanding of how data is being collected by multiple parties inside of their website. So we'll make a small audit of tags, trying to understand what are the tags that are being fired, how they are being fired, and what are mostly the third-party companies that are hidden from those customers inside of other tags. This is important for them to start to understand where there are some probably issues that they will have, because again, remember, you will be responsible for all your data, no matter if you have a contract with a third party or not. So if your contract is not really well written, you have some problems. The law will be applied in three main areas. The first one is of course the legal department. So you have to talk with your legal department. You have to have a legal partner for that. The second one is technical department. This is where Lima will be there helping. And this is a part of the idea of what we'll be doing in e-commerce Brazil, showing them where they can have some technical issues. And the third one is the business department, because it's always important to remember that the law is not there to impact your business. You should be able to do business in compliance of the law, even because the law is not asking you basically nothing that is already on Brazilian constitution. So the right to privacy and equally relationships between companies and shoppers.